going off after all those ads are coming in, or after they all get dragged in together after killing off their ads and everything, and they bloodlust and they start popping off onto a lot of the trash mobs that they spawn on top of.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's just kind of the main idea there.
But like, why don't they actually just? I know it's weird, but like on live servers, we usually just bloodlust on those ads to make sure we kill them off, because it'd have to take so much extra time for them to go back and actually have to kill over another wave or something like that. It's very, very odd.
Well, this is a lower key level, right? So they can just burst the boss down a little more quickly. So it's not too big of a deal. We're only talking about 20 tyrannical, whereas on live key pushes, you're talking about 25s, 26s, where a fortified key will have a couple key levels higher than the 20 we're seeing here. So yeah, not too big of a deal for them. The thing that I'm interested in is that we haven't seen that much DOS run this week at all. And when we have seen it run, I think it was already mentioned, I was trying to figure out why VMX decided to use my camera mic instead of my real mic. We haven't seen clean runs. I mean, this was a time trial dungeon on 21. Teams were able to get sub 20-minute runs in here. Why is our fastest run this week at 22:40? Let's see if they can pick up the pace here a little bit in our grand finals.
That's right. Game number 1 getting started here as DOS gets underway.
Yeah, so it looks like we see a very similar comp here by Perplexed and Team Name. The only difference is the Shadow Priest versus the Windwalker here for Perplexed side. So a little bit of a mix of physical damage and magic damage. They're not going for a full magic damage or a full physical comp. Neither of those teams deciding on one or the other damage type, as they both skipped to the left initially, just avoiding that first pack at the entrance because they want to deal with that one while fighting the last boss, and they're just moving in to this Arden Wield area first. Both of them have that Bloodlust available, so I would assume we're going to see a pretty big pull coming into this Arden Wield area, or they save it for the Sayaxa pull, where we've seen a lot of teams just pull a lot of trash on top of that boss.
Yeah, and there are different strengths and weaknesses to the comps as well, right? The thing about the Shadow Priest is it's not necessarily buffing anyone in the group by a consistent amount. The big gain for a Shadow Priest that you normally see in groups is just to make your Fire Mage pretty much a god, right? You give them the Fey Guardians, give them the PI, let them pop off every time they combust, but they're playing a Frost Mage right now, and Frost, yeah, the haste is pretty good for him, yeah, the Fey Guardians is pretty good for him, but like, you're already hitting Icy Veins every 15 seconds. You don't really need that much more haste because Icy Veins is already giving you 30% haste, so I don't really see what the point of it. Also, I feel like the Shadow Priest is way more prone to getting messed around with by the Quaking affix than the Windwalker is, and the Windwalker should do more damage. So maybe it's a comfort thing. I'm not too sure, but we see Curry playing Monk as well. We'll have to see how it ends up working out for them. I think the Shadow Priest will definitely do more single target damage than the Monk, though.
Yeah, it is possible that he's going for a comfort pick, and we also have Inspiring, which we've talked about before. Inspiring is definitely one of those affixes where you do want to have a lot of priority target damage to be able to get those inspired mobs down before you need to interrupt or help CC the mobs. Not something necessarily needed in the Arden Wield area because none of these mobs actually cast anything that you actually have to interrupt. But Perplexed is gathering up an insane pull as Divine is using his defensive to be able to survive as they just keep up gathering and gathering. Let's see if they actually use the urn for this one.
Yeah, well, hasn't been popped yet. There we go. Wolfisco now channeling that urn just now. Gets the stun off. Everything to be stacked up nice and easy there. And they should be enough, I think, to clear everything else down. Now, the thing is, they don't really have any of their major cooldowns for this pull, right? It's just going to be our Frost Mage pretty much doing most of the damage right now. Bone Dust might be back up for this, but you can see Swag really isn't doing that much damage here. Still losing to the tank, because he is not getting any of those Dance at 2G procs. This is probably on the low end of Windwalker RNG, unfortunately. But when you have the urn available, when you have the slows from the Frost Mage, being able to kite around this pull is actually pretty powerful. Now, you're noticing that on both sides, the tanks is really making sure not to get too far away from the mobs. Now, some of these Spriggans here, they have a really weird miss ability where if your tank is, I believe, more than 30 yards away from the pack, they'll start targeting your healer with the channel, and it'll pretty much instantly kill them when you're pulling this many mobs. So that's why the tanks are kind of trying to stay as close as possible, but by not staying in melee range at the same time, and they're both doing a pretty good job. Surprisingly enough, Team Name is playing better than Perplexed right now. It looks like that Shadow Priest is working out for them on this trash a lot better than the Windwalker is.
Yeah, it definitely seems like it as they're gathering up their Sayaxa pull. It looks like this is going to be the trash they're pulling on top of the boss. They did finish off a smaller mob here, to the hatchling, to make sure the matriarch isn't getting pulled. And now they're just gathering up a pretty huge. Well, I mean, look at all of those mobs just following Lipan down to Sayaxa, as they're going to be using the Bloodlust as well to just to deal with all of that trash, and the boss Perplexed, on the other hand, doing the same thing.
Doing the same thing, and they're actually kind of pulling the boss at the exact same time, so maybe it was a little bit of a safety thing at the end. They weren't using their cooldowns to finish off that trash, whereas Team Name did, because check out the Windwalker Monk damage, absolutely blitzing this AoE. But I feel like you don't want to kill the trash too hard, right? But I guess if he's the only one really focusing on doing AoE damage, you're still going to get a bunch of single target focus out of the Sub-Rogue and the Frost Mage. But I really don't know how much you're gaining over the other team, because they both have that Sub-Rogue Frost Mage burst, right? I mean, look at the boss health for them. Team Name is still holding a pretty significant advantage on the boss, even though Perplexed ended up pulling the boss at roughly the same time.
Yeah, it was also a little bit unfortunate for Perplexed that Swag was the one who got the bomb on him, because he apparently was the designated cooldown user for this pull that saved everything, and then he got that first bomb and had to go and jump up, probably losing a little bit of damage as well. And then he got back-to-back lightning bolts, had a pretty high debuff that needed to be cooled down and healed away by Ryzen. And yeah, Team Name just really blasting that boss. Lots of focus target and single target damage by them. They're able to finish off Dealer Saxer probably a little bit quicker than Perplexed on their side. If you look at the percentage in trash, very similar. Just like a slight advantage for Perplexed in trash. But as long as it doesn't result in one extra trash pull somewhere, then it's not gonna matter at all.
I mean, also important to mention a lot here is that if you take a look at the damage meters, there's one very big glaring difference, is that Ryzen didn't have his Ashen Hollow and Wings up for the pull of this boss. That's one of the big differences in the overall damage here. Igloo kind of just helped carry the passive AoE to slowly cleave the mobs down, while Curry, Mikkel, and Anda kind of just burned the boss as much as possible while doing their passive AoE from their normal single target abilities anyways. So really paid off for them to make sure they had that Ashen Wings combo up before the boss. Saved them a lot of time, gave them a nice 20-second advantage in this section of the dungeon.
Yeah, now both teams are getting back to that middle ring area. We'll see which direction they choose from here. Very likely going to the Mechagun area, not to Hakar, because they want the Bloodlust for Hakar, and they also don't want to do any sort of backtracking either, so that's going to be the last ring they're going to. In the Mechagun area, we've seen a bunch of different kinds of strategies and routes from these teams, as some of them chose to basically just skip all of the trash to the boss, and then just deal with the boss first and deal with the trash afterwards, which very likely has something to do with Ashen timings. But the Ashen timings, as Sarah just mentioned, are going to be different from those two teams. So we might see a different approach with the Mechagun area for them.
Right, I mean, the big thing is going to be, can they use that Ashen here to enable some massive pull that Team Name can't? And I'm trying to think in my head, what is it that they could do? I remember this massive pull that I saw from watching one of the best Chinese teams play, one of the Aster squads. And I think they might be doing it right now. Their mage pulls those two warlords out of the way, or potentially someone else in the group pulls them. Anyone can do it. They all have Shadow Meld. And once that's out of the way, you can pull the rest of those trash mobs into this room. Now what they're going to do is they're going to pull this car into this corner, wait for it to do its first Haywire channel. Once it's channeled, everyone can go around the corner, start pulling the dog. Ashen's just going to sit here and cloak, and now they can all stack all these mobs on top of each other, blitz everything down with AoE, and there are plenty of things in here to dodge the second Haywire from, but because Ashine popped his cloak there and got some single target onto the drill, it's not even going to get a second Haywire cast off. This is such a dangerous pull, but it's executed to perfection by Perplexed here.
Damn, that was so well done by Perplexed. That was so clean. Having that extra damage there as well from Ashine, really meaning that there's not even any need for those immunity cool defenses by anyone else except the Rogue. Team Name, on the other hand, they had a different approach, as they were dealing with those warlords at the start. That's where Igloo committed some of those cooldowns, as they're now just stealthing the rest of the trash that Perplexed just dealt with. They're not dealing with that just yet, as they're moving on to this Lubricator and the Sentinel oils. I do think Perplexed might be pulling those two on their side. But yeah, a little bit of a difference in routes, as they're up to 61% trash on Perplexed side, and Team Name not getting nearly as much trash from the Warlord pull that they did on their side.
Yeah, that's the question. Is that 7% extra trash that Perplexed just achieved by going for that pull now going to make a difference in the long run? I mean, that's a lot of trash difference to make up. On top of that, it allows them to not need their second invisibility potion to get back to the main room once they've dealt with the mana storms. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, make sure that see if that's going to make a major difference. And honestly, Perplexed just dealt with that lubricator plus oil pack way faster than we saw from Team Name. Having that Windwalker Monk on your group to use its 1 minute cooldown to just blow up that little 5-target pull is so useful over having the Shadow Priest, and that was, I mean, a huge time save for them.
Yeah, definitely looked like it, as Team Name is already fighting Millhouse, but Perplexed not too far behind. With that 8% extra stretch they have, definitely means that Perplexed are going to be a little bit in the lead, as both of the Paladins are dropping that Ashen now for this boss. You can see them rise up in that damage meter as well. This boss is going to take a decent amount of time, because it is tyrannical, plus 20 of course, and this dungeon specifically has some boss fights where there's just absolutely no way to pull trash on top, right? This Millhouse and Maleficent, nothing you can do here. You can literally just fight the boss. And then there's only so much these teams can do to speed up that, right? Like of course they can, bring more single target damage, have more cooldowns or whatever. But of course all of these players, they know how to press their damage buttons. They know how to do the rotation. So there's not going to be a huge difference in kill time between the teams.
Exactly. So it's just all single target damage right now, right? And it looks like Perplexed is once again managing to catch up on the boss damage. They've started the boss behind Team Name, but they are now essentially at the same boss percentage, maybe like 2% behind Team Name. So the 1 minutes are really paying off in droves here for them. They're playing really well, and honestly, I'm kind of surprised that the Windwalker pick is playing out so well for them, because usually when you play like think about a focused single target group, it kind of feels like it's going against that strategy by having somebody in your group that wants to blast the AoE while the other two want to keep the AoE alive for single target. But it looks like they've kind of found that perfect balance with their group, and they've crafted the strat around it. If you go back and look at that Dealer's Eye exit pull, maybe if they had the Ashen Wings from Ryzen, the trash would have died too quickly for them to get enough of their focus targeted. So maybe there's a lot more thought in this than we're giving them credit for.
Yeah, very possible, as both of them are now trying to finish off Millhouse Mana Storm and then moving back to Maleficent. Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think there's definitely a lot of thought that they put into this, even though we thought that neither of those teams actually practiced the dungeon too much because of the way they assumed that the other team is going to ban it, right? But it doesn't look like that at all. It looks like both of those teams did practice this dungeon, even though we haven't seen Perplexed play it before. Team Name, of course, we did see already, but Perplexed, they had this time, the extra time from winning the upper final against Team Name earlier, and they did have the time to just put some extra hours, some extra practice runs into this dungeon. It seems to be paying off.
A 3-second time difference in the boss kills from Perplexed and Team Name. All neck and neck on the boss kills, but Team Name has to deal with the trash pull that Perplexed already had dealt with. And even though Team Name dealt with less trash in this section, Perplexed was able to deal with the boss kill 14 seconds faster than Team Name. Perplexed probably did that entire section of the dungeon almost a minute faster than Team Name, catapulting themselves into the lead here. And I mean, they're in a commanding position now. Divine Field now, going and pulling that Rage Spirit, going to use the Shadow Meld to remove aggro from it, and this group is going to move on quickly. They have a lot of AoE pulls left, but man, they have secured a massive advantage for themselves here.
Yeah, definitely, as they're now pulling this Death Speaker pack on top of the Incinerator Tormentor, which can be dangerous as Inferno cast actually goes through. No one interrupted that cast as it went off. Thankfully, no one went down as Ryzen just keeps everyone alive. But yeah, that's definitely an interrupt you want to do. We've seen things happen with Team Name in a necrotic way. So hopefully they're going to be interrupting the rest of those casts as they do. And the Death Speaker goes down as well. A huge amount of damage coming out of Swag here on the Windwalker to be able to deal with this big pack.
Yeah, and again, inefficiencies in the strat from Team Name, dealing with that single target and Rage Spirit. I wasn't paying attention, unfortunately, because I was, as you were, keeping an eye on that massive AoE pull, because that could go terribly wrong. But yeah, Team Name dealing with a single target and Rage Spirit, a major loss of time having to kill that one mob. Don't know if they pulled it on accident. Maybe we'll find out later, but they're now going for that massive pull as well, pulling Incinerator Arcalath in on top of the group. But Igloo goes down. The only way they can get him up is with an engineering res. Fortunately, the Speaker's frontal goes away from him, so he's able to get that off. could have been a disaster if he didn't. He would have had to cancel the res cast, cloak, and then go for it again. They only just now are able to get it off. Somehow the group is still alive without a healer for so long with that incinerator mob up, and it looks like they should be fine. They have their cheat deaths available, but that was a very scary moment there.
Yeah, Mikkel also proccing that cheat death, and it looked like it was an Inferno cast going up for them as well, as Arcalot just managed to cast through, doing a huge amount of AoE. Everyone survived except Eagle going down there because of that extra damage that he took, and it seems like they're fine at this point, but still very dangerous as the Death Speaker is just casting through because they're saving their interrupts for that Inferno. Perplexed on the other hand, already dealing with this Hakar trash. Ryzen actually getting I'm not sure he got a hit there by one of those ghosts, or if he actually got a lightning bolt from a Voodoo Hexer. Either way, they are engaging Hakar now and committing the Bloodlust as well.
Can you live a melee from those ghosts? I thought they were just
I don't think so.
instant death. Wait, what is the tech right here? Okay, no, I understand
like this.
completely. So these are the High Priest patrols, right? Is this
The
on
inspired
purpose?
ones.
Or did they run away? Okay, yeah, so they CC'd them in the back. They let them run into the boss, because the only thing stopping you from getting to Hakar is killing the final 4-pack before the door. So once you're through that door, letting these just run in is fine because they have nothing else to heal. They're not going to pull anything else. You've already killed everything else. Interesting tech there, and also added tiny little benefit of giving your Frost Mage and your Subtlety Rogue a little bit more focused funnel damage for the boss. And check how fast they're killing Hakar. They've been in combat with this boss for 45 seconds, and it's already at 25%.
Yeah, that's absolutely insane damage they're doing to this boss here. I don't think we've seen any team kill this boss so quickly. And yeah, I really just I like the tech with the double inspired mob. The only thing that I was thinking about that maybe the priests are healing the boss, possibly as well, if they get that heal off. But if the heal isn't percentage based, if it's just like a certain amount, then it's not that big. We know the Voodoo Hexers, they heal a lot with their healing wave, but the heal from the priest is not actually that much, so maybe even if that goes off, it's not that big of a deal. Either way, Perplexed now done with Hakar already, as they only need 8% trash, and that is exactly the amount that they left at the entrance of the dungeon when they skipped it at the very start. So they are ready to pull the last boss here, and once they get teleported to the last platform after dealing with hopefully all of the visages to get that Quadra buff, then they're going to be dealing with that last 8% of trash.
And I mean, we were questioning it at the start of the dungeon here. Why haven't we seen that sub 20 to the other side yet? It's only because we haven't seen Perplexed run the dungeon yet.
Yeah.
They are on pace for a blazing fast time in this dungeon right now. I wouldn't be surprised to see them get something like a 19 flat, maybe a low 19s. This is crazy fast, and they're playing insanely well, just not letting up the pace at all, cruising through the upper bracket. These guys are nuts.
Yeah, actually absolutely crazy what they're showing us here. You can also see the double Tormentor buff here. We have the slow plus the physical damage increase that they're gonna have to deal with. So lots of damage on Divine. Other than that, whenever they're dodging the frontals from the boss, they of course have to pre-move and be positioned in the middle of the room, unless they have some sort of blink available to them. And they also want to pre-move to their position whenever he does the intermission cast as well, because you only have a certain amount of time to actually get to your platform, and if you don't manage to get there, you're just gonna die. So that's why they're gonna have to pre-position in the middle of this cast that is happening right now.
Well, yeah. I mean, Team Name is doing their best to keep their heads in the game, but they are just so far behind right now. Only just now dealing with a car, whereas Perplexed are already onto the intermission here. And if they get through this first intermission clean, they will be home free. They do have one final AoE pull, but with the haste buff from that the boss gives you, I don't think they'll have any problem dealing with that last platform. The one biggest problem is Ashine does have to deal with that in Rage Spirit, but you saw he just hit the Vanish Distract on the Rage so it wouldn't get anywhere near him, and looks like it's going to be easy peasy for them getting through this intermission phase.
Yeah, hopefully so, as Ashine is also avoiding this Enraged Spirit is patrolling towards him. He did move a little bit to the right, making sure he's not gonna aggro that one, because they don't want to have anything to do with that Enraged Spirit, as Muzella is gonna pull them back. And let's take a look at the buffs. They have... what? Okay, there it goes, just ramping up. For a second I thought they only had killed one of the totems, but it's now ramping up. You can see
Oh,
they
the
have
fourth.
four.
All right.
There we go. So they dealt with all of those totems. all of those visages, as the Ashen Hollow just now being popped by Ryzen, as he had saved it for this pull. And they're going to be getting the last percentage as well, trash percentage, I mean, to be able to go up to 100. And then they also need to deal with 3% of the boss's HP, which is not that much, considering, yeah, that was scary. But yeah, 3% boss HP is not that much for 20 Tyrannical. Usually there's quite a few percentages that you still have to chew through, especially if you do this trash pull. So they're dealing with this really quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we're so used to seeing teams dealing with that trash pull and still having 3 or 4% of the boss's HP to live through, but check this out. The last Warlord's going down, the boss is at 1% HP left. That's that focus damage coming in from the Subtlety Rogue and the Frost Mage just absolutely just crushing the boss. 1942 on the board from Perplexed, showing us off the sub 20-minute other side and going up in our finals here over team name 1-0.
It does exist there, like you said, sub 20 minutes, so strong there by Perplexed, taking game number 1 in the other side, Tettles.
Yeah, and it was interesting because Team Name started out with a pretty early lead in the dungeon, and they were something in the range of 20 seconds ahead where Perplexed was, but Perplexed was able to really claw that back with that arf with the race car pull. That was a very scary pull, but they were able to pull it off. I think it just comes down to like the compositional differences, that Windwalker Monk versus that Shadow Priest. It allows you to do a little bit different things. Look at that Windwalker Monk, 20k DPS. Very cool.
Yeah, that's pretty good there. That's pretty good there, Tettles. What else you got for us on the analysis side?
Yeah, I really didn't feel like there was anything that like very much needed to talk about. It was just about the efficiencies of how this dungeon ended up working out. Team Name, like I said earlier, their first pull, they used that urn a little bit earlier than when Perplexed did, and that allowed them to get these mobs stacked up. Look at how tight those mobs were stacked. And I thought that Team Name was going to be able to take this whole entire dungeon, but Perplexed just claws this whole entire thing back. Look at this dental drill into Arf, into all of these headless clients. This is just this is a pull that you do not try at home ever. Please don't do this in my weekly run.
I want to try it.
No, don't try that.
Bring your vent there.
Busy that day.
It'll be fine, right?
That pull is actually such a cool pull to set up. It has so many like tiny little intricacies to it. I tried to go through them during the cast, but there's a lot going on. So like to go over that particular pull, you have someone, usually it's a mage because they can invis and not commit shadow meld. They pull the 2 warlords in front that you don't want to deal with, pull them off to the side, entire group goes through, that mage drops aggro, you pull that dental drill into the corner, wait for its first haywire cast to go off. Once the haywire starts casting, everyone line of sights the haywire, pulls into Arf, starts AoEing. And then if you get a second haywire cast, you can either line of sight in either of the 2 hallways. There's a couple different places. It's just such a cool pull, and it's actually really repeatable once you get the setup down. But it looks so dangerous when it's really not that scary. It's so good to see them pull that kind of thing off.
The biggest issue is that they were not in position to get a second haywire cast. I think if they got a second haywire cast, that was just that was imminent doom. If they got a second one, they knew how much damage they had, and the amount of practice that they were able to put in on this dungeon, it really did show.
And I mean, I suppose they could be able to put that off the line of sight, but when you have Inspiring on top of that, and you have any of the headless clients that are running all over the place and just AoEing that you can't actually stop whatsoever. I mean, huge kudos to the melee DPS for staying alive through some of these pulls, because it seems like in a lot of cases, Nagura, where massive pulls go wrong is where you start losing one person, or they start, like getting dropped really, really low, or they're not able to get into position, start helping, and start AoEing down as easily.
Yeah, I think, having all of those melee players, I think Windwalkers are the ones that actually die pretty often in those like chaotic pulls, just because there's so much to look out for. For example, in Halls of Atonement, when you just see 20 mobs or more being gathered on top of each other, and some of these mobs have frontals. So there's so many things you have to look out for. Debuffs that are on you that do a huge amount of damage, and then the shards do AoE, and then all of a sudden there's frontals going out in like all directions because the tank has to kite. It's absolutely crazy for some of those melee players to survive these pulls, and I don't envy them. Like, I'm glad I'm arranged and I can just stand back and don't worry about those frontals.
True, not that.
Me too. Except I got to get into melee sometimes as disc for my boon and everything like that. Drives me crazy. I got to go join those melee plebs. Ugh. But with that, it's going to move us on to game number 2 here, Zyro. And with that, it's going to be looking like a Plaguefall angle, followed up by Necrotic Wake. So very, very fast dungeons ahead of us.
Yeah, and again, I mean, both of these dungeons are right in Perplexed's wheelhouse. We saw two insanely fast Necrotic Wakes out of Perplexed, even a sub-15 run. We saw fast runs from Team Name, but they're like a minute and a half slower still. So, I mean, again, balls in Perplexed court. I mean, I love Team Name. Lepan's been eating nothing but W's all week, but I think it's got to end somewhere.
Man, you are ridiculous for saying that.
What about the semifinals, Zyro? What? Okay.
He's in the finals, isn't he?
True. You know what?
W.
At the end of the day, he's not only qualified along with his team, but they also are in the grand finals here, going up against Perplexed for their share of 20K prize pool, and they already guaranteed to go into the tournament. Now they're fighting it up for the seeding, for the proper seeding here, Tettles, as well. So no matter what happens here, they got to be real happy.
Yeah, exactly. And I was talking to them a little bit right before the start of this series, and the word that they kept using was relieved. And I think I think that both of these teams are very relieved that they made it to the global final tournament, and they're going to be focusing a lot of their practice on this. This is just, hey, I don't want to play Echo in the first round kind of formalities, or whatever top seeded team is coming out of the other cups. Like, all of them are going to be very scary. It's not just Echo, and this is. I think that Team Nam could take this Necrotic Wake. We did see them have a little bit of an issue earlier. What was that transition? We did see them have a little bit of an issue earlier. And our production trolling us with the transitions. They need to make sure that they get the kicks on the incinerator, was what I was going to say.
Yes.
In a little bit more words.
Yeah, and again, it's been that first pull time and time again, Zyro, of just making sure the kicks are where they need to be, making sure they're able to execute properly. And I feel like some of the best teams that we've seen thus far are also really patient with getting it set up. You see, they take some time to be able to get like their melee actually run in and start AoEing. Take some time for cooldowns to start getting popped until the tank is sort of ready. We saw that with some like frontals in like halls and like spires as well, where the patient tanks who aren't running all over the place are the ones who are setting up the most successful pulls.
Yeah, and I think this is something that really falls into Team Name's kind of court really well, because they wouldn't have had time to practice these grand finals matches as much because they were in the lower finals. But remember, they started off the day with a series where they played Necrotic Wake. They had that really unfortunate first pull where they had kicks up for the Inferno twice, but just didn't kick it in favor of kicking something else. So hopefully they've got those nerves kind of shaken out at this point. They're playing well. They got through. They're qualified for the global finals. Just play well, play Perplexed close. I want to see you guys play great here.
They need to ratio them.
Plus L. Plus you fell off.
Hold this L. Yeah.
Plus you played Moonkin. Didn't ask.
The hood watches Lapan now.
Oh my goodness, I can't wait till we get Now and Echo and everything like that playing. I can't believe it's going to be week 3 until we're going to be able to experience it.
Too many memes. Oh no.
Yeah.
You got JPC in the second week. There's going to be more memes
That's right.
there.
I know. That's probably the coolest thing is
The
that
man.
every single weekend we're going to be having different teams coming up. We got Hill Factory, which is now the Complexity team that's going to be coming out. We got Ambition, and then it's Echo and Incarn. They're also going to be in week 3, if I remember right, Settles.
Yeah, Echo and Incarnation both in week 3. I think that all of these cups are going to be super close, and I'm excited with how this new format is playing out, just because we had 4 very close teams vying for these top 2 slots out of Cup A, and I think it's going to be like that for Cup B and Cup C, and it's just so weird because we didn't know who was going to be able to make it out, and Sheesh was the 6th seeded team in Cup A, and Team Name was the 7th seeded team in Cup A, and Sheesh ended up getting knocked out by Team Name. Obviously, they're close in seeding, but at the same time, it's not what was expected if you looked purely at those seeding differentials.
Yeah, no question. Seeding isn't everything. They got to be able to perform on game day, and it looks like our teams are getting themselves ready here with Perplexed up 1 over Team Name. Team Name down, but they don't want to have a repeat of the upper finals from earlier today. Necrotic Wake is going to get going with that fortified bolstering combination. Let's see how both the teams do as we get going.
All right, so I do think Team Name needs to do something better than we've seen from last time, because Perplexed, their best run was literally like 1 minute faster than Team Name's fastest run, right? So Team Name either needs to pull something out of their hat, or they need to somehow shave off like 1 whole minute of their run, or they just hope for Perplexed to make a mistake, right? That is a good strategy to go for as well. Just change nothing on your strat and hope Perplexed is messing up, which can totally happen in Necrotic Wake, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong, especially on this first pull that we're going to see both Perplexed and Team Name do now.
Yeah, and you got to think about this as well. Now that Team Name is qualified for globals, will their team name remain Team Name, or will they actually get a new team name? It's going to be interesting to find out. But we're into this first massive pull. Bloodlust pop for both teams. Haven't used a weapon yet, but gotta keep an eye on those Inferno casts from Incinerator Arcolath as Dr. Anda drops incredibly low. Remember, he's a Frost Mage. He doesn't have any cheat deaths, so once his health reaches 0, he's actually dead. There's no Cauterize to save his life. So, gotta keep an eye on that. Was able to be kept alive by Igloo there. No Inferno cast off for either team just yet, and it looks like Team Name is dealing with Incinerator ever so slightly faster, but with the weapon going off there at the end from Perplexed, they're gonna deal with the trash. Never mind, at the exact same time as Team Name, both of them deal with that first trash pull and engage with Blightbone at almost the exact same time.
Wow, I mean, what a clean pull coming out from both those teams. As I looked at Anda's HP just going up and down on that Frost Mage, and he basically, for 80% of this pull, he had the negative debuff of that ocular gland, a trinket from Sanctum's second boss. So I was like, oh no, please just heal him up. He's pumping damage, but did manage to kill off that pack anyway, as Rising dropped really low for Perplexed. And one thing that we didn't mention yet is the comp. Both of them playing the exact same comp, of course. They playing the Disc Priest for that mind control that they're gonna need later on. And then we have a pretty standard Rogue Windwalker plus Frost Mage comp.
Yeah, the two focused classes plus the AoE pumper. Yeah, it seems to be like the pretty default comp for most situations. Also, they pretty much have every buff/debuff in the group minus the attack power buff from the Warrior, right? So they're really kind of covering all their bases here. It's a really solid group comp, and I love to see it. Now, of course, the Disc Priest is something that you have to see in this dungeon because it does deal with the skip, like you mentioned. But already problems for Perplexed as Swag has gone down in the goop, and you have to remember the only way they have a battle res available is from the engineering res. So either they're going to have someone go in with a personal and try to get a res off on him, or they're going to have to wait until that ground effect is gone. And that's not great. That's even worse at this point, because you lose one of those Goliath orbs that not only does damage to the boss and the worms, but also heals the group, doing AoE healing. And because they don't have that extra orb, it's going to be a full team wipe for Perplexed. The boss was at 30%. They just lost an entire minute of time because of that one death.
No, I think actually what went wrong there is that, I'm not sure if this was intended or not, but they had 2 Harvesters and a Vanguard with this boss.
Oh boy.
2 of the Harvesters were sheeped and blinded, but that's probably why Spec went down. And of course they can't kill those mobs because it's bolstering, so they couldn't cleave them down. They just had to just off-tank that Vanguard on Divine Field, and the Harvesters just stayed there being CC'd. But it got broken out once in a while by some AoE damage, and it was just causing lots and lots of problems for Perplexed, as Team Name not having any issues on their side whatsoever. And Team Name, this is the win that they need to get to the game 3. That would be amazing to see. So Team Name, all eyes on them to see if they can do the rest of this dungeon clean. They're up to 41% trash already. Done with that first boss. They picked up the orb on Lepan as well, and they have the Goliath buff still. Let's see what they're gonna do with that one.
Man, look at Anda taking the glasses off, sticking them on the head. Got a little smile and head shake there as well. Feeling good. I believe that wipe would be coming up on their monitors right about now with the stream delay, so I wouldn't be surprised if he was reacting to that. That has got to be a good feeling when you're playing well, but you can't just take it easy just yet. There is so much dungeon left. You have to play clean, you have to play well. You can't just assume that Perplexed is going to keel over and wait for game number 3. You have to play well for the rest of this dungeon, so let's just keep an eye on them. Watch how they play. They gotta play clean.
Yeah, definitely have to, as they're picking up that Goliath buff again once more as they're moving into this other huge AoE pull that they're doing, even with the double Bone Carver here and the Marauder pack too. So lots of damage on the pan as he's popping his defensives to stay alive here. The sorcerers need to be interrupted here in the corner. You can see the Ring of Peace being used by Curry to be able to get that mob in for that AoE damage, and everything is just going to be melting with that AoE damage aura they have around them. And Lepan using that orb as well, as you can see in the damage meter. Lepan not just that good at Vengeance Demon Hunter, he did use that orb that he picked up earlier.
Oh yeah, for sure. Great execution coming out of Team Name here, doing exactly what they need to hold on to the lead that they've gained for themselves by playing the first half of the dungeon clean. I would say that the next major pain point for them is going to be making sure they can deal with that first massive AoE pull in the Necropolis. I think this Varuth into a Marth pull is pretty kind of wired down. There's not too much that can go wrong here unless your group just gets destroyed by a Frontal Breath, so gotta keep an eye on that. Not trying to cast a curse them, hasn't happened all weekend yet. We're not trying to start that trend again now, but I mean, all eyes right now are on Team Name. Can they pull these pulls off?
Yeah, and they're engaging a Marth now as they still have Varuth up. This is actually pretty dangerous because everyone still has that 50% healing reduction aura on them, which is not helping for a Marth because that boss does a lot of AoE damage. And then on top of that, they also have that bleed coming out that we saw and that just used Ice Block for. And Mikkel dropping incredibly low. They're also using their Heart CC to not have to deal with these mages, both Incap and Shackle Undead being used by them, because once that AoE comes out of the boss, if the ads are hard to see, they won't actually explode and wipe you, so you don't have to deal with those at all.
Yeah, that was an absolutely pro bait from Dr. Anda, taking after his namesake Dr. J, doing the big brain stress to make sure he's getting the soaks and not anyone else, purely a skill play, and not taking that extra bleed damage when they had the healing reduction. Exactly right. And through the first set of ads, and now the ticking damage is going to start coming out from that boss once you cast the final harvest. But at this point, I think they're chilling, right? They're probably not going to have to deal with this next ad set. They might end up killing it anyways, just because, you know, it's free focus single target damage on the boss. But shouldn't be too much of an issue for them to deal with. Unfortunately for Perplexed, more problems for them on this second pull as Ashan goes down on this massive pull onto Narzuda. That's, again, one less orb that they have to deal with that trash. One less character pulsing AoE damage, and it's going to be a problem for them as he goes down yet again. Just more problems for Perplexed.
No, Ashan was the one who actually had picked up the
Team Name!
Anima Orb as well. And Team Name is having a full team wipe. It looks like Lepan, the only one alive. They have one battle rest. Mikkel is still alive actually too. He's using the battle rest on Igloo. They might be able to fix this, but it's so difficult as the boss is also enraged. Mikkel going down, so he cannot actually dispel the rage either. And they think they might just be resetting here. Shadow melting off the aggro. Oh no. This is actually a huge mistake by Team Name. Having so many issues on Marth. They get the Masters up. Thankfully, they got the Battle Rest on Igloo, making sure they got the rest, but they got a really bad Quaking as well. Had to interrupt that Masters, and now Perplexed has a chance to come back. But Perplexed still behind. They definitely lost more time on their wipe than Team Name lost on this wipe just there.
Too much single target focus, not enough AoE. Looked like one of the final harvests just went wrong for them there, as all 4 of their non-tank players, except for Mikkel, actually there's 3 of them went down, and that's just not what you want to see. The biggest problem for them is that the one battle res that they were holding on to was just committed. They're not going to get another one up for another minute and 50 seconds or so, and they'll only have that one battle res for the final boss, which is where things can go horribly wrong if you don't have them sometimes. So really unfortunate that went wrong for them. Now, because of how terrible the wipe was for Perplexed earlier and the continuous issues they've had with pulls afterwards, Team Name still does have an advantage, but the margin has closed considerably now. No longer are they 2 or 3 minutes ahead. Now they're probably only about a minute ahead.
Yeah, definitely have to play well from here on out if they want to be winning off of this mistake that Perplexed made on the first boss. And no, Perplexed is having more and more issues as both the Rise and Divine Field go down. Thankfully, there's only going to be one last, but it's bolstered so highly. This Bone Carver has so many bolstering stacks to they do get it down, thankfully, so that the pool does not reset, but still just a lot of deaths on the board, up to 10 deaths, 50 seconds on the board, only 20 seconds on the board for Team Name, so a 30 seconds advantage for Team Name.
Not only that, but because the only people left alive were the mage and the rogue, they had no way of rezzing any of the players on their team. The battle res isn't available, so you can't get the healer up with that, so everyone had to instantly release. They knew that and made that call instantly. They released before the trash was even finished, so it's not going to cost them that much more time, but still, I mean, the run back at this point is brutal. It's another 30, 45 seconds on the board, and man, when you're this far behind already, you hate to see that. Team Name now has secured themselves an entire boss advantage now. Perplexed hasn't even begun to engage a Marth, let alone started the RP. And remember, they got to deal with Execution of Ruth as well. So that's what Team Name has to work with. Even with the wipe on a Marth, they still have a very significant lead.
Yeah, definitely. They're now up to the Necropolis, which can also be incredibly dangerous, especially with that bolstering affix that we have here and the fortified as well. Huge tank damage coming out here in Lapan from those Stitchworks and the creations. We do see an orb being committed here again by Lapan, the one that he just picked up behind that broken Goliath. And hopefully they get done with this. And that drops incredibly low. And did somehow manage to survive, though. Maybe it was a Flashcraft or Cleaver that hits him there. Either way, it was incredibly dangerous. As Lapan also procs his cheat death. And he now needs to start kiting as he's basically out of defensives. And those debuffs are just stacking up on him, just increasing the damage from that Tenderize.
Yeah, those Tenderized stacks are no joke. Once you get 3 or 4 of them, you got to get out of dodge quickly, and there's no trees to help you out in this group, so you got to get out of there quick. They do have things like the Ring of Peace to help with some of the other mobs, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't work on the major mobs that actually apply the Tenderized debuff, so good to get out of there completely. Now, one thing that I think needs to be mentioned when you're in the Necropolis with a Priest is there's this very never-ending predisposition for Priest to just take a cleaver to the face and turn into an angel. Anybody in chat who's ever played with the Priest here knows that that's the case. So if both of these teams are able to get through the Necropolis with no angel form, I'm going to be very impressed. Got to keep an eye on those 2 healers here.
Well, thankfully they play Disc and they don't have angel form, so I don't think that's gonna happen. As they're dealing with the Stitcher. But Lepan goes down. No angel form for him either, unfortunately. Yeah, you are right. As the resurrection is being casted by Igloo, the Fleshcrafter is still in the corner being CC'd. That's the one that Igloo is going to mind control now. You can see him run there, mind control being casted, because now the Necropolis, or the boss, is being fooled, basically, saying, hey, there's no more enemy mobs around. You can spawn the next gauntlet. And that is what is happening right there, as both of those assistants spawn because of the mind control. And that's why you see those priests being played in Necrotic Wake, and you don't see the Holy Paladin that you usually see. And now those assistants need to be played. Sometimes we see the Fleshcrafter being used for the cleavers here to help out with the assistants, but it can be really difficult because all of a sudden you have double cleaver from both of the assistants, and you have an extra cleaver by the Fleshcrafter too, and all of those 3 can go on the same person. So that's why that's probably the reason why Enda actually just kept the Fleshcrafter in the sheep there, making sure none of that weird thing happens and we don't see people randomly go down to triple cleaver.
Yeah, like Dratnos mentioned earlier this weekend, got to make sure you have your either high-end trigonometry course or your vector calculus to make sure you can deal with all these cleavers. Otherwise, you are going to see your priest go into angel POV, even if they're disc priests. They're going to go into angel POV in spirit. But not the case here, as Team Name is able to deal with that pull cleanly. Love to see it. Actually, both of their assistants went down at roughly the same time as well, so making sure they're staying efficient with those cleaver casts as well, putting them where they need to go. And now it's just a matter of making sure you keep that Fleshcrafter polymorphed until its cleaver is off CD. And then once it's off CD, you repoly it, wait for the cooldown to come back up. It's about 15 seconds or so it's a pretty easy timer for the mage to keep control of. But doesn't look like they're going to be too worried about it. Once the gore grind is down below 30% or so, they just let it go into the group so they can cleave it down a little bit. It's not going to die to their cleave at this point. So kind of safe to keep it here. And once the trash pack is dead, they'll repolymorph it, get it set up for the next pull.
Yeah, and we see Perplexed just doing kind of the same thing in the Necropolis as well, as they're just keeping the sap from a shine onto this Fleshcrafter to make sure they can use it later on and just break it whenever they feel like it. Team name now waiting for that last trash pack to spawn before they can do the boss. So this last Rot Spew, which is usually the most difficult pack, because this Rot Spew just casts a Mutilate on the tank, which all the other ones do as well. But then he also casts this disease that targets a random person in the group, and it does a huge amount of initial damage that can be very dangerous. So that's why we see all of them being ready to use those defenses whenever it comes out. You saw Enda just dropping incredibly low because of it, and you also see them stack to make sure the cleaver from the Flashcrafter is going into the high HP target, which is of course the Rot Spew.
You know, I wonder, this has been bugging me for a long time. They have a mob named Rot Spew, but they named his cast Spew Disease. Why wouldn't you just make it Spew Rot? Like, it's right there. It's the name.
True.
Oh man, missed opportunities, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. They have to change it right now. This is actually unplayable, as team name is using their Shadow Melt. I think this is also one thing that most of the teams adapted to because of bolstering. We see everyone play Shadow Melt here. Usually when we see comps nowadays, not everyone plays Shadow Melt. Of course, the Paladins cannot be Night Elves, so they cannot have Shadow Melt. But usually you also don't see anyone else play Shadow Melt, except maybe the tank, because they can't be dwarves. And then whenever you do any sort of skips, you have the tanks pull something to the side, everyone else walks past, and the tank uses Shadow Melt to de-aggro. But for this dungeon and bolstering, you want to have Shadow Melt on every single player, because you want to get rid of the aggro from that Flashcrafter, because it is really highly bolstered, and you don't want to deal with those bolster stacks. And the bolstering also doesn't affect the cleaver, so the cleaver is not actually going to do more damage the more bolstering stacks it has. It does the same amount. So therefore, definitely want to just de-aggro that mob once it has like approximately 20 bolstering stacks after dealing with all of this trash.
I mean, I remember early on in Shadowlands when people were abusing bolstering cleavers to like one-shot the third and fourth boss in this dungeon, and Blizzard's like, yeah, we need to fix that yesterday.
Oh,
so,
yeah.
Yep, thanks for ruining our fun. People who abuse things in dungeons can't do that anymore. Of course, that'd be pretty funny if we had that in the MDI. I'd probably get fixed the next day. But not going to be an issue here. The one thing I have to keep an eye on is Team Name going to get this Surgeon Such Flesh down before the next escape? If my calculation in my head is correct, it should be in the next 5 to 10 seconds or so. So they got to make sure they get that off. And it looks like they are going to be able to get him down. Yes, he is. Surgeon Stitch Flesh goes down, opening themselves up to get to that final boss of the dungeon, and they gotta be careful here. You gotta make sure you CC the Fleshcrafter in the right spot so that it doesn't kill somebody with the cleaver going up, and also so it snaps up instantly. Looks like they did put it in a pretty decent spot, close to the center of the room. If they move forward a little bit, should get snapped up instantly. Perfect execution from them there. And now, keep an eye on this. Every single one of those throw flushes that goes out, throw cleaver, 6% on the boss, gone instantly. Check it out, 71. Okay, it was 4%. I was wrong. But still, big chunk of damage every time. That's a few 100,000 damage that they don't have to do themselves every time it casts that, and that happens every 15 seconds. Pretty useful. And check out the blast they have with the Bloodlust up. Boss already below 50%.
Yeah, and they're trying to drop as many Dark Exiles as possible with their Shadow Melts that they have available, making sure it picks a different target. And another thing to note as well is oh no, the Ice Block doesn't work anymore, and he tried his best to avoid that Exile. Didn't work out though, as Enda unfortunately is gone now, down to the Exiled, as they have to deal with the Flashcrafter as well to get that last 2% that they're missing on their board, and have to finish off Nalthor.
Enda has no cooldowns. He should just die right away. He has no way of killing this mob.
Yeah.
They should just use their battle res on him. I mean, look at what he has available. No frozen orb. Yeah, okay, good. He died instantly.
There we go.
Great. So, yep, get the res on him. Actually, you don't even really need to. The Fleshcrafter's gonna finish it off. Yep, one more throw cleaver is all it's going to take for Team Name to send us to a Game 3 deciding match to see who is going to be our #1 seed for the Global Finals coming out of Group A.
That's right. Team Name going to be taking that victory, staying alive in our Group Finals right now. Necrotic Wake pushing us to a Game 3 to decide it all. So huge rats there. The Team Name showing some good life here, Tuttles.
Yeah, and to wear the sunglasses indoors.
Yeah, you know he's got to be feeling good about that. I mean,
their
unfortunately,
future's
he has
so
to take
bright.
them off. Oh, yeah, I mean,
shades.
but he does have to take them off because they're not going to Spires next. They're going to Plaguefall next.
That is true. An equally fun dungeon just as much as Necrotic Wake is.
Yeah, It's also going to be a very quick dungeon too for these teams, so they got to make sure they're gonna, they got their running shoes on here, Tuttles.
I think unfortunately Perplexed needed their running shoes for the necrotic wake, man. They kept running back a couple of times from the beginning.
Maybe they could get some without like shoelaces because they kept tripping on theirs.
Okay, dude, we gotta stop.
I can do this all day, Tuttles. Your turn, buddy.
Oh, Jack, please tell us about Disc Priest. We need to know more.
Oh yeah, actually, I'm sure Zyro could talk quite a bit about it and its angel form. But before I dig too much into that, we also
spirit when they go down.
So cringe.
Tuttles, use the words. Do the thing.
Do the thing. Look at the thing. Look at the thing. Dr. Anda and their team of team name are able to kill the first mob and the first pack. They had some major problems on Incinerator Arcolith earlier in the day, but this time they just kicked forehead. And on the opposite side, you did see there was a full wipe from Perplexed. Swag was dead for it felt like forever, and then just one thing led to another. Blightbone got bolstered. There was a lot of issues happening, and then it caused a full team wipe for Perplexed. That ended up costing them something in the range of probably like 4 to 5 minutes, just in terms of time loss that they occurred because of this. And did one of those worms explode? Yeah, so one of the worms got 3 melees off and ended up blowing up on the entire group. And team name wasn't without their own problems, but fortunately enough, their issues weren't as costly. The warrior you see there has a substantial amount of HP as that final cast from Amarth is going off. It's interesting because they are able to like leg sweep. They can even kidney. They can shackle that warrior at the final second of the final harvest, but nothing happens.
It's tough to shackle. It's really,
okay.
really tough to shackle.
I'm not saying that
damage taken.
Yeah, I'm not saying that shackle's the preferred.
Well, you're like, oh, well, they have shackle. Like, why didn't they shackle? Like, if they have any damage on them, then
I was just throwing out abilities.
Tattles, we're on YouTube. You could just rewind and we could look at what you said.
I wasn't meaning it like just shackle forehead. I was just listing abilities that they could have used. Anyways, Perplexed ended up losing because they had more costly wipes. That's it. That's the thing. I said the thing, okay?
Thank you for that, Tattles. Wonderful analysis. Really, really, really spot on. I appreciate that. We're going to be going on at the Plague Fall for our decider on this one. Now that we've thoroughly humiliated Tattles.
Yeah, Tattles, I think you should just stop talking for now. Either way, we are going to Plague Fall, as you said. And Plague Fall... So if both of the teams are playing their best time, which they have done before, so both of those teams have played this dungeon before, and I don't think there has been a single death from either of those teams in the times they played Plaguefall. So both of them incredibly clean in this dungeon, but Perplexed is 1.5 minutes faster in their best time compared to team name. So if both of them have a clean run, then it really clearly should go to Perplexed, because there's no way team name has shaved off like 1.5 minutes since they played it last, which was the last series, right? They literally had no time in between their last Plaguefall and now. But the same thing was for Necrotic Wake as well. Necrotic Wake was also favored for Perplexed because they have the faster run if everything goes cleanly, which it didn't. Yeah. So what team name has to do here is they have to hope for Perplexed to make some sort of mistake, probably, which definitely can happen with those risky pulls that Perplexed is doing there.
Yeah, it seems like every time we think of what's going to be happening next here, Zyro, something just comes out of nowhere and hits the other team like a truck, basically. We're like, oh, well, like, DOS, we haven't seen Perplexed play it at all. It's, maybe they're not as practiced. Oh, they just win. Team name, they might struggle on this one or something like that. Oh, they win, no problem.
Come out of nowhere, kind of like those cleavers to priest players in Necrotic Wake. But yeah, I mean,
maybe if the tank would soak them, okay?
Yeah, why would they do that? You can still heal when you're in angel form. You're just playing the run spec if you don't go angel form.
He's gonna turn this car around.
The cleavers that like fixate. My monk tank just likes to taunt them to make them go faster, so I have to run further and further away. It's really a tough life out here for the priests.
Healer problems. Yeah, I mean, It's just like the Necrotic Wake, right? We already said it. It should be in favor of Perplexed. They have a minute and a half faster time, but I mean, look at the affixes we have for the Plague Fall, right? Raging Explosive. It's just disgusting. It doesn't even matter what the key level is. Those are two things that can kill you easily if you're not paying attention to them. So, yeah, it's going to come down to nerves and how they can play in this final match. And I mean, kind of a cool story for Perplexed starting off the tournament with the Plague Fall, where they completely crushed any of our expectations for how fast that key could go. They could finish off the tournament with that key as well and secure themselves that one seed. It'd be pretty cool.
That's right. It might just end how it began. And, you know, we were looking at going into this tournament from the beginning as well, Nagura. We're talking about, I wonder how fast things are going to be. It's going to be really cool not having to worry about 20% breakpoints and everything. Key levels are much higher than we'd seen in the previous season, and teams are still going even faster than ever before.
Yeah, it's crazy to see, and it's funny how we talked about this before, that the lower key levels, because it goes from 19 to 22, right? And this Plaguefall is going to be a 19. So theoretically, you think about, oh, this is going to be like an easier key. But funnily enough, the lower keys actually have caused more problems for these teams, because the lower the key is, the bigger of pulls you can do that are actually possible, right? So you just want to go bigger and bigger the lower the key is, and it creates so many problems because all of a sudden there's like 5 different mobs that cast something really dangerous that you have to interrupt or that you have to deal with somehow. And that's why Plaguefall specifically was one of those dungeons where we've seen multiple teams attempt incredibly crazy pulls that ended up not working out for them.
Yeah, and at this point, this is exactly what these teams need to be doing, is they need to be attempting and putting out their very, very best because, you know, on the side of Team Name, they have some ground that they need to make up from what they've been doing thus far, but at the same time, you know, we're looking at that preparation, that experience a lot of these guys have had, Zyro, and when it comes to the best in the business for this group, these two are it.
Oh yeah, they've definitely proved that with how they played this weekend. I mean, it's kind of crazy looking at the times that both of these teams have been able to put up. That 12-28 run that Perplexed had on the very first game of the tournament, after all of the games we've seen this entire weekend, that time just doesn't even seem real. I kind of want to see it again just to see how it actually happened, because that is so ridiculously fast.
Yep. The teams are ready. This is going to be our decider match for who's going to win Group A. Both teams have qualified for our global finals, so better seeding and bragging rights right here are on the line. Let's see what they've got as Perplexed and Team Name get rolling.
Yeah, I'm so ready to see those two teams just show us those really quick clears again. And as you mentioned, the last time Perplexed played this dungeon was the very first dungeon of this tournament on Friday. And back then, we didn't really have any other times to compare it to. So yeah, we were impressed, but we weren't as impressed, right? We didn't know just how fast they are compared to all of those other teams. So incredible just how quick they are. And we're going to take a look at this first pull. Both Team Name and Perplexed doing a crazy pull on top of this Fire Tormentor here, Arcala.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy to think about, because coming into the very first tournament of the season, the only thing we've seen teams do is time trial keys, which are keys that you can practice over and over and over again. Going from time trials to tournament play is such a huge difference in dichotomy and how teams have to understand how to play. And we saw that 12-28 Plaguefall from Perplexed, and you're like, oh wow, that's pretty fast, that's pretty cool. But we didn't really understand the magnitude of how insanely fast that key was until we had everything else to compare it to. So, I mean, it's actually insanely crazy how fast that is. And as we're talking about how good Perplexed has been playing, Team Name is doing them one better. They've got 1% extra trash on the board. They've already gotten onto Globgrog before Perplexed got there. And yes, Perplexed is catching up on the boss damage, but they came to play. I mean, they're kind of proving that they're in the exact same group of teams as Perplexed, that they came to play. And I mean, with the caliber of MDI veteran players they have, we should have expected that from them.
Definitely. And I mean, of course, we know that Perplexed is the favorite team in the series, but the fact that Team Name won one game in this final here, in this grand final, is already crazy to me, because Perplexed is the #1 seed coming from the time trials, right? They're the team that basically got the best seeding out of all of the teams that are supposed to be taking this one. And the reason why you want to win this, both of those teams already qualified for the global finals, of course, but the seeding is going to be so important. You want to have this #1 seed to make sure that you're not going to be facing a team like Echo maybe or Complexity in the very first round already. So definitely going to be incredibly important for those teams. And Perplexed really is going to give their all to win this Plague Fall. But it's so close, as both those teams are done with the first boss, moving on to the next trash, and both of them playing it incredibly cleanly compared to that Necrotic Wake that we saw before.
Now, slight differences in strategies coming out that I want to highlight. Team Name committed their Bloodlust to that very first pull with Incinerator Arcalath. That's why they were able to deal with it more quickly and get to the boss faster. Perplexed saved their Bloodlust for the funneled single target damage onto Globgrog with all of those slimes, so that's why they were able to take that 20% advantage onto the boss. And the allocation of cooldowns just seems like it's working out so much better for Perplexed because of how they saved that Bloodlust for the boss. They were able to then have their cooldowns back up for their very next trash pull, where they went way bigger than Team Name did, getting themselves 6% more trash on that very first pull, and then just continuing it into yet another massive pull. It just looks like Perplexed has the route for this dungeon here, and they're going insanely fast. And look at that, Divine Field, he doesn't care about the Raging Affix. He's just sitting in there tanking 5 or 6 mobs, all of them doing double damage, no problem.
Yeah, that was absolutely crazy. It's like Pan goes down for Team Name and Kuri as well following. They do have a battle rest to get them back up, but it's going to be so hard as this Raging Buff is just following around Igloo. But they're fine as they just have to deal with these blobs here, and then they can get their rest back up. But yeah, definitely a little bit of a time loss, but not too bad. Because they can recover, and Igloo actually did stay alive, so they can just get the Mass Res off here.
Yep, Mass Res going off. Not too big of a time loss in the grand scheme of things, but when you're going up against Perplexed and you know that they can put up a time like they have, any small time loss is a very big deal, as they're falling even further behind now. 16%, 17% trash percentage lead secured for Perplexed as they go into this section of the dungeon that used to be the really important section of the dungeon where you want to make the best use of the Plague Boar as you can, but they really don't help you out that much anymore. They were able to skip past all of the tentacles using that shroud, making sure that they don't accidentally dip their toes into that slime, giving themselves a debuff, taking them out of stealth. Great execution yet again from Perplexed, and they're going to be taking down Verulex Blightweaver with the help of those heavily nerfed Plague Boars.
Yeah, and then they also are trying to get rid of this Enrage effect as well with a Shine, using that shift, making sure the mini-boss is not doing increased damage to mainly Divine Field probably, as they're now moving on with the trash. I do think we saw them pull all of the rest of this trash, so after this initial pull, they're just getting rid of that damage reduction block. They don't want to have that at all when they do the boss pull, but now they're going to be pulling the rest of the trash on top of the boss. So that's going to be happening in just a second. Dr. Icarus being engaged, as well as the rest of the trash that is on the other platforms. And they're also going to be ignoring those plague bombs as well. They're going to be using their immunities to mitigate that explosion damage and just completely focus on the boss. They've only dealt with 1 Tormentor so far. We've seen them skip the slow mob, and they're also going to be skipping the physical damage mob as well. And I do believe they're actually skipping a 3rd one too, which we've seen be incredibly dangerous on Stradama, having that Veruth 50% healing reduction.
I mean, we've seen this dungeon in particular from previous matches this weekend be lost because teams decided to only deal with 1 of the Tormentors rather than 2. I mean, that healing debuff on the final boss is no joke. You really need to make sure that you phase into the intermission as quickly as possible and get out of combat so that those debuffs are removed, so that your healer can catch up and not have to worry about people being low going into the final infectious rain. So it can be very scary if any of your DPS players happen to go down. Plenty of ways to die there. First Plague Bomb goes off, all of the immunities and defensives have been committed there, but with Dr. Icarus dropping that low and going down, they're not going to have to worry about the second Plague Bomb. Now, the thing is, Perplexed have to know that they're ahead by a ton right now, right? You can see on the delay on the stream that they're probably a minute to a minute and a half ahead, but it doesn't matter. We're not trying to play it safe here, skipping right past Executioner Veruth, going into this middle island pull. This is where they get the rest of the count that they need. A lot of other teams will skip this because they've gotten more count early in the dungeon. I believe Team Name is going with that strategy. You can see their trash count is the same as Perplexed without dealing with all the trash just yet. So, yep, this is going to be their last trash pull besides the trash in the next 2 bosses' rooms.
Yeah, and a little bit of an unfortunate thing here happening for Team Name, as Igloo taunted the congealed slime away and stunned it and turned evil on the blob outside, but then the boss actually jumped on him, and while he's jumping on him, of course, he's gonna get that damage reduction aura. So a little bit unlucky there, as Perplexed is now moving to that third boss room area to Venom Blade. Let's see what they're planning on doing here. This might just be a crazy pull by them.
Perplexed actually stood there for like 10 seconds. I don't know if you noticed. They were just standing there. I wonder if they were just waiting for cooldowns for this pull. Maybe the key's just too low for him.
So.
Maybe it's just too easy for him.
Yeah, they're just too fast. As they're dealing with an ambusher, too many eyes, a sniper, there's just a lot of trash in this pull, and they're also getting Dominant Venom Blade on top of this as well. This trash room is so tricky to do huge pulls in, because almost every mob is somehow dangerous. Either it casts the spiders, or it casts something that needs to interrupt, or there's a huge amount of damage to the tank. It's definitely just lots of crazy things happening that they have to deal with this trash. But they pulled everything together, actually, except this one sniper. So that was actually insane. They pulled the double ambusher. I mean, that is something that you never want to do on live servers. And they somehow managed to get it done. That's probably why they were waiting for some sort of cooldown that they needed to make this happen. Team Name, though, are on their heels, as they're now also moving to this third boss room area, which is a little bit too slow in comparison, because Perplex is just blasting through this dungeon.
I mean, they have to go for the big pull here, right? They have to go double trash pull in the boss if they want to have a chance of securing themselves the dungeon. And here we go. Team Name is going for broke right now. This is what they have to do to give themselves any chance outside of Perplex wiping to take this dungeon and make it go in their favor. Looks like the trash is going down pretty quickly, though. Gotta keep an eye on those raging snipers. That can be very dangerous, but it is going to go down. Now, they're not done with the trash yet. They still have that CC'd sniper in the corner, just like Perplex dealt with. They still do have that ambusher in the front of the room as well, but looks like they're not going to go into them just yet. They're going to deal with these assassins first. But even with the success of that AoE pull, it seems like it's just too little too late, as Perplexed have already dealt with Dominant Venom Blade and are heading down into the final room, getting ready to deal with Margrave Stradama.
Yeah, so the last thing that can happen here for Perplex is actually Stradama not going the way they planned, because of course they have the triple Tormentor debuff, which means 50% more physical damage taken, 50% slow, and also 50% healing reduction, which is going to be the most dangerous thing, because if there's going to be multiple rains that are going to be casted by Stradama, that's not going to be healable. They're going to have to commit their defensives, their immunities, to survive a couple of rains, but then afterwards, it's going to be over. So they need to have they need to make sure they have their offensive cooldowns assigned perfectly for each phase, making sure they're pushing her into the intermission before too many rain casts go out.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just a formality at this point. All you got to do is deal with the final boss and you're home free, but man, that final boss is very scary. Now, of course, they do have the Necrolord Windwalker on both teams to give themselves those slime buffs. That helps out a lot. I mean, that haste buff is no joke. It's pretty much like an extra Bloodlust, or just a permanent PI on your entire group, so that's pretty nice. And there you go. All the trash is dead. They're at 100% count. The Fleshcraft is out to get those buffs, and here we go, into Margrave Stradama. Let's see if they can do it. They're so fast, by the way, that they don't have their Bloodlust up just yet. We're 10 minutes and 40 seconds into the dungeon. This boss, these guys are just so ridiculously fast.
Yeah, that's actually just crazy. And they are gonna get Shadowlands into that phase fairly quickly. The Infectious Rain just now started casting. They only got like one tick of it, so that's great.
One tick.
They didn't. Yeah, it was one tick. They didn't have to use any defenses for it. That's exactly what they want. And now they're gonna have a Bloodlust for this second phase, which either they're gonna commit it for this phase or for the last, right? Depending on what kind of offensive cooldowns they want to commit for this one here. Ashen, I think, is available for them as well. So they just need that perfect allocation of cooldowns to be able to skip all of those rains.
There's the Bloodlust. There we go. They're definitely going to be skipping that rain here, and that's going to be really good because none of the players dropped their Tormented debuffs for that entire intermission phase. They kept the Devoteds alive the entire time, and that's not an accident. Remember, they still have a Frost Page and an Outlaw, not Outlaw, his name is Outlaw, a Subtlety Rogue in their group to try to get as much focused damage into the boss as possible. I guarantee you that is on purpose, and they'll probably do it again, keep the Plagueboard Devoteds alive because they have the Bloodlust available. They still have wings available from Ryzen as well to heal them if they really need that extra healing as well. And with one final phase left, I think it's a formality. Perplexed is absolutely on another level.
Yeah, team name, they're now also on Margrave, and they triggered that second intermission phase. I mean, they're really not that far behind, right? You really gotta give it to team name, just performing insanely against Perplexed, but it's just too little too late as Perplexed is finishing off Margrave Sardama here with that Ashen being popped, all of the offensive coolers that they have left, and they're gonna be the ones winning this Group A MDI Season 2 final as they win 2-1 against team name. Wow.
Are you kidding me? It ended as it began, with Perplexed having almost the exact same time on their Plaguefall run at the very first game of this tournament on Friday. Are you kidding me? 12:28 was their time. Amount of the skill of
Wow.
Perplexed, the fact that they're the #1 worldwide seed.